My name is Arthur. When I pried my heavy eyelids open, my mouth was filled with dry dust and grit. Before me lay an asphalt road, cracked and parched by the scorching sun. By the wayside stood a lopsided, rusted metal sign, its paint long since peeled away by wind and sand, leaving only a few barely legible English letters, "Welcome to Oaktown." Not far away, a scrap pickup truck sat half buried in the yellow sand, its bed scattered with a few empty plastic water bottles. The air was bone dry. Every breath felt like swallowing burning coals. I quickly realized that I had transmigrated. Furthermore, I had arrived in a fictional American-style wasteland undergoing a devastating megadrought. There were no air conditioners or ice cokes here like I was used to in modern society, only endless desolation and the despairing scent of death. But I didn't panic, because I discovered I had brought something utterly unreasonable with me. I lowered my head and spread my hands. At the edge of my retina, a translucent interface emerged. It was the inventory from the classic game Minecraft, with its neat 9-slot hotbar and equipment slots, invisible to anyone but myself. To verify that this wasn't a near-death hallucination, I walked over to a completely withered old oak tree by the roadside. Taking a deep breath, I raised my right fist and slammed it hard against the rough trunk. There was no blood, no agonizing pain of broken bones. Accompanied by a few crisp thud-thud sounds, the once indestructible trunk actually shattered. Even more defiant of the laws of physics, a perfect cube of log remained suspended in midair, rotating slowly. I stepped forward, and the log instantly transformed into a tiny streak of white light, darting into my inventory. The system rules are absolute in this world. I swallowed a mouthful of painfully dry saliva, my heart beginning to race wildly. I immediately opened the crafting grid in my mind, breaking the logs down into planks, then crafting a crafting table and sticks, and finally fashioning a wooden pickaxe. I walked over to the rocky area by the roadside with the wooden pickaxe, easily breaking off a few blocks of cobblestone to upgrade to a stone pickaxe. Afterward, I found some scattered rusty car sheet metal next to an abandoned pickup truck. When my hand touched them, the system directly identified them as iron ingots. A few minutes later, 2 shimmering silver iron buckets appeared in my hands. Now, I needed to solve the most critical problem: water. In this godforsaken place that had been parched for who knows how many months, where even the well water had completely dried up, finding water was harder than climbing to heaven. Braving the scorching sun, I searched around an abandoned supermarket on the outskirts of Oaktown for half an hour. Finally, at a drainage outlet in the basement, I managed to squeeze half a bucket of foul-smelling murky water out of a tattered rag, and in a muddy puddle of a dried-up riverbed, I scraped up another half bucket of sludge. If it were an ordinary person, drinking this kind of water would lead to a fatal viral infection. But I didn't need to drink it. I only needed it as raw material. In the wasteland outside the supermarket, I used my hands to dig a shallow pit 2 meters long, 1 meter wide, and 1 meter deep, exactly the size of 2 blocks in the game. Next, I lifted the first iron bucket and poured that bucket of foul, murky water into the left side of the pit. Then, I lifted the second iron bucket and poured the muddy water into the right side. According to the laws of nature, this pathetic amount of water shouldn't have even been enough to dampen the dry mud at the bottom of the pit. But in the face of Minecraft's absolute physical rules, the laws of the real universe were utterly trampled. The stream of water from the left and the stream from the right began to extend toward the center. The moment they met in the middle of the pit, a crisp, extremely pleasant system sound effect rang out, splash. The entire pit was instantly filled with crystal-clear water shimmering with a pure blue light. The silt, the stench, and the bacteria were completely refreshed and erased the moment the system made its determination. The surface of the water was as flat as a mirror, even refracting a dazzling glow under the sunlight. I couldn't wait to scoop a full iron bucket of water from the pit and tilted my head back to drink it all in one go. It was sweet, icy, and free of any impurities. But the most terrifying part was that no matter how much water I scooped out with the bucket, the water level in the pit didn't drop by even a single millimeter. As long as those 2 source blocks at the bottom remained, this was an infinite water source that would never run dry. In the midst of this world-class drought capable of destroying civilization, I had created an eternal reservoir using nothing but 2 buckets of muddy water. Thud. Just as I was frantically washing my face, a soft sound suddenly came from behind me. I turned around and saw a young boy, about 10 years old. He was wearing an oversized, tattered baseball jersey and with skin and bones, with sunken eyes and lips so cracked they were streaked with blood. He was clutching a rusted supermarket shopping basket tightly, staring at me as if I were a monster, or more accurately, staring at the puddle in front of me that never seemed to diminish no matter how much was scooped out. What? What did you do? The boy's voice was raspy, sounding like sandpaper rubbing together. His name was Theodore, but he told me to call him Theo. Theo had been watching me for quite a while from behind an abandoned Walmart shopping cart. He had seen with his own eyes as I poured 2 dots of dirty water in, and the entire pit transformed into a vast expanse of water. He even saw the liquid at the edges of the pit defying gravity, suspended straight up in the form of blocks. Theo suddenly dropped the shopping cart, and, ignoring the shattered glass and sharp gravel covering the ground, collapsed to his knees before me with a heavy thud. He didn't try to snatch the water. Instead, he slammed his head hard against the scorching asphalt and began to wail. "Lord God! Please, you can conjure water, you must be a god! Please save my mother, she's dying, I beg of you!" I froze for a moment, then hurriedly pulled him up, filled an iron bucket to the brim, and handed it to him. "I'm no god, I'm just an ordinary player. Drink some water first, then take me to see your mother." Theodore couldn't process my explanation at all. He held the iron bucket with trembling hands, took several greedy gulps, and then, as if clutching his last lifeline, pulled me toward Oaktown. Oakwood was a typical American country town that should have had manicured lawns and white picket fences. But now, all the lawns had turned to scorched earth, the paint on the wooden houses was peeling, and the streets were deathly silent, without even a stray dog in sight. Theo pulled me along as he pushed open the door of a dilapidated 2-story wooden house. The moment we stepped inside, a dark gun barrel was pressed directly against my chest. "Back off! Where did a drifter like you come from? Don't even think about touching the last of our supplies!" A scruffy man with sunken eyes gripped an old-fashioned double-barreled shotgun with both hands, his finger already resting on the trigger. He was Theo's father, Carter. "Dad! Put the gun down! He's a god! He can create endless water out of thin air!" Theo shouted anxiously, lifting the bucket of impossibly clear water in his hands toward Carter. Carter stared at the bucket of water, which looked as if it didn't belong in this desolate world, and froze. The shotgun lowered slightly. Just then, a heart-wrenching cough erupted from the fabric sofa in the corner of the living room. I turned to look. A woman named Evelyn lay there. She was gravely ill, suffering from one of those unknown fevers that ravaged this arid wasteland. Her skin was covered in black pustules, and the high fever had left her in a semi-conscious state, every breath accompanied by a heavy rattling in her lungs. By all logic, in this wasteland devoid of antibiotics and modern medical equipment, she wouldn't survive the night. "I can save her," I said calmly, looking at Carter. Carter gave a miserable laugh and dropped the shotgun, which, in reality, had no shells at all, before kneeling on the ground with his face in his hands. "Save her? With what?" "The town doctor starved to death 3 months ago. Mayor Harrison went to the state capitol dozens of miles away to beg for help and didn't bring back a single pill. She's dying, and there's nothing I can do. In the rules of Minecraft, there is something that can clear all negative status effects. Whether you are suffering from poison, weakness, wither, or nausea, as long as you drink it, all debuffs will be instantly and forcibly reset by the system. That thing is milk. Are there any cows left in town?" I turned and asked Carter. Carter looked at me as if I were a madman. "Are you joking? There is indeed 1 cow left behind the town, but it hasn't had a single blade of grass or a drop of water in 4 days. It's so thin its bones are practically poking through its skin. Forget milk, if you killed it right now, you couldn't even squeeze out a drop of blood." "Take me there," I said, my voice leaving no room for argument. Carter let out a sigh of despair and led me to the backyard. It was a cattle pen enclosed by broken wooden planks, where a cow as thin as a skeleton lay huddled. Carter was right. The animal was on the brink of death, unable to even lift its eyelids. Its ribs were sharply defined, and its udder was completely shriveled. But in my vision, as I focused on this dying creature, only a few simple words appeared on the system interface: entity, cow. The system didn't care if it was dying, nor did it care if it conformed to the common sense of mammalian physiology. As long as its label was cow, its function was to produce milk. I held the iron bucket and strode over to the shriveled cow. Carter shook his head behind me with a bitter smile, seemingly finding my time-wasting behavior utterly ridiculous. I ignored him, aimed the bucket at the cow, and then, following the system's operational logic, gave my wrist a gentle flick, performing the right-click to use action. Click. A crisp system notification sound, audible only to me, rang out. In the next second, Carter's eyes nearly popped out of their sockets. His jaw dropped as if dislocated, and he let out a meaningless, guttural rasp. Because the moment I waved my hand, that originally empty iron bucket was suddenly filled to the brim with rich, snow-white, fresh milk that was even emitting wisps of warm steam. The dense aroma of milk instantly filled the dry backyard. The cow hadn't moved an inch. It remained shriveled and on the verge of starvation, yet my bucket was filled with fresh milk that defied every law of physics and biology. This is impossible. Even the great dollar crash wasn't this absurd. Carter slumped to the ground, pointing at the milk bucket in my hand, his voice trembling so much he could barely speak. Carrying the bucket of milk, which was practically liquid gold in the wasteland, I hurried back to the living room. Theodore helped prop up the semi-conscious Evelyn. I brought the iron bucket to her lips and carefully poured the warm milk into her mouth. According to medical common sense, giving high concentrations of raw milk to a dying patient with severe infections and organ failure wouldn't just fail to cure them. It would likely accelerate their death. But under the overriding rules of Minecraft, real-world medical logic was nothing more than a joke. The moment the first sip of milk flowed down Evelyn's esophagus, a miracle occurred. There was no lengthy drug absorption process, no metabolic buffer time. On the surface of Evelyn's body, a vast number of tiny pixelated light spots, visible only to me, suddenly emerged. That was the system executing the clear abnormal status command. The scene Carter and Theodore witnessed with their naked eyes was even more shocking. The black pustules on Evelyn's face were wiped away as if by an invisible eraser, receding at a visible speed without leaving a single scar. Her rapid, labored breathing instantly became steady and strong, and her deathly pale complexion returned to a healthy flush within a second. Only 3 seconds had passed. Evelyn snapped her eyes open, taking a deep, sharp breath of air. She looked at her hands in a daze, then actually threw back the tattered blanket and stood up steadily. A woman who, 10 minutes ago, had been at death's door with one foot in the grave, now appeared more vibrant than any healthy adult. Carter? Theo? I feel like I've had a very long, comfortable sleep. I'm not in any pain at all. Evelyn even hopped twice on the spot, her face filled with disbelief. A deathly silence filled the living room. Carter looked at his wife, who was now restored to health, and then at the iron bucket in my hand, which still had a bit of milky residue at the bottom. Suddenly, his entire body began to tremble violently, and tears surged forth like a broken dam. He pulled Theodore along, and the father and son faced me, their knees hitting the wooden floor with a heavy thud. Although Evelyn hadn't quite grasped the situation yet, seeing the actions of her husband and son, she followed suit and knelt down as well. A god! You truly are a god descended upon this world. Carter pressed his forehead firmly against the ground, his voice completely distorted by extreme awe and ecstasy. Thank you, Great One, for redeeming my wife. The Carter family is willing to offer everything to you. I looked at the family of 3 kneeling before me and rubbed my temples, a headache forming. In my hand I was still holding the iron bucket I had used to milk a starving cow. I'll say it one more time, I'm really not a god. I sighed helplessly. I'm just a player. But clearly, on this desolate and arid wasteland, from this day forward, no one would ever believe those words again. A god has descended upon the Carter house. He pulled a dying man back from hell with milk. The news swept through Oaktown like a hurricane in just half an hour. In truth, there weren't many people left in the town. The American small town that once housed over 200 residents had been ravaged by the dual torments of drought and famine. Between those who fled and those who died, fewer than 60 skeletal residents remained. Mayor Harrison was a gaunt old man who once commanded great prestige in the town, but now even his signature cowboy hat was caked in dust. When Theodore dragged him along, stumbling toward the abandoned highway on the outskirts of town, and he saw with his own eyes the infinite pool of water that didn't drop even half a millimeter no matter how much was scooped out, the 60-year-old man collapsed to his knees in the dirt. He buried his face in the water and wailed uncontrollably. Then, he saw Evelyn, her face glowing with health and her spirit fully restored. From that moment on, led by Mayor Harrison, all 54 survivors of the town gathered by the roadside and prostrated themselves before me in worship. Standing atop the roof of the scrap pickup truck, I looked down at the crowd kneeling on the ground and sighed. I had no desire to be a savior, but I knew that if I continued to deny it now, these desperate refugees might collapse instantly. More importantly, I didn't belong to this world, and I needed to figure out my current situation. Everyone get up. Drink your fill of water first, I said, waving my hand as I jumped down from the truck. Drinking water could save a life, but it couldn't fill a stomach. To survive in this world, I had to utilize the Minecraft system mechanics to acquire more resources. I looked around. The few withered trees near Oaktown had already been punched away by my bare hands. To get more wood for crafting tools, I would have to head to the mountains a few miles away. I carried my stone pickaxe, walking along the cracked asphalt road toward the edge of town. Mayor Harrison and the Carter family followed at a distance, as if escorting a deity. I walked for about 800 feet, passing an abandoned gas station. Just as I was about to take another step forward, an incredibly eerie sense of suffocation suddenly enveloped me. It wasn't a lack of oxygen, but a warning from the depths of my soul, as if something absolutely forbidden lay ahead. I ignored it, forcing my foot up to take a step forward. The very moment my boot hit the ground. Asterisk crack. Asterisk. A tooth-gritting, thunderous boom exploded across the sky. I jerked my head up, and the sight before me made my blood run cold. The sky ahead, which had been a cloudless and piercingly bright expanse, was now like a mirror struck by a giant hammer, suddenly splintering into countless pitch-black cracks. Those fissures weren't dark clouds or lightning. They were pure, lightless black. Through those black cracks spreading frantically like spiderwebs, I saw a sickening, violet-black energy churning within. It felt as if the entire three-dimensional reality had suddenly become a fragile sheet of paper, and behind that paper lay an abyss devouring everything. As a veteran player, I was all too familiar with that color and aura. It was the void that appears at the lowest level of the Minecraft world after breaking through bedrock. But the void before my eyes was 10,000 times more terrifying than in the game. It carried a horrific sense of oppression, as if it intended to completely delete all matter, rules, and even time itself. The system interface suddenly flashed a blinding red light. Warning. Current level is too low, insufficient permissions. Crossing the safe zone boundary is strictly prohibited. World structural damage is extremely high. Crossing the boundary by force will result in the collapse of reality. I broke into a cold sweat and immediately took a violent step back, retreating into the perimeter of the gas station. As I stepped back, the terrifying black cracks in the sky healed rapidly like a film being rewound, returning to a normal clear sky in the blink of an eye. The surrounding temperature also returned to that dry, stifling heat. So the system has set an initial boundary for my activities. I wiped the cold sweat from my forehead, a realization dawning on me. I was currently only at a measly level 1, and the system's range of influence, my divine realm, could only barely encompass the entirety of Oaktown and this small patch of the suburbs. If I forcibly crossed the boundary, not only would the system fail, but I might even trigger that terrifying purple-black void. I turned around and found Mayor Harrison and Carter slumped on the dusty road, paralyzed with fear. They couldn't see the system prompts. In their eyes, there was only one explanation for what had just happened. The Almighty is being suppressed by the heavenly Tao. Harrison trembled all over, kowtowing toward the sky with tears streaming down his old face. When a true God descends upon the mortal realm, their power is far too immense. If you forcibly leave the divine domain, even heaven and earth will collapse, unable to withstand your divine pressure. I opened my mouth, wanting to explain that it wasn't my pressure at all, it was the world itself that was about to break. But seeing the look of extreme awe in their eyes, I swallowed my words. Let them misunderstand. At least it would save me a lot of trouble explaining. Since I couldn't leave, the only option was to solve the survival issues within the existing territory. The water problem was solved, but now the entire town faced another fatal crisis: famine. The town's food reserves had been exhausted months ago. Even the expired cans of dog food in the supermarket basement had been licked clean. I could now hear the thunderous growling coming from the stomachs of the townspeople around me. I'm going to start farming. I took a wooden stick and rummaged through the haystacks by the roadside for a while. According to the rules of Minecraft, breaking grass has a chance to drop wheat seeds. Sure enough, after just a few swipes, several plump, faintly glowing green seeds popped out of thin air and landed in my inventory. I used the remaining planks and cobblestones to craft a stone hoe. Walking up to an abandoned lawn in the center of town, one that had long since become as hard and dry as concrete, I raised the stone hoe high and struck the ground with force. Bang! The moment it made contact with the stone hoe, the rock-hard, arid wasteland transformed directly into a standard, perfectly square farmland block. The most miraculous part was that, because this plot was close to the infinite water source I had built earlier, the system determined it was irrigated. The soil, which had been bone-dry just a second ago, instantly turned a deep dark brown, even seeping with moist vapor. I stepped forward and planted the wheat seeds. A bright green seedling immediately poked its head out from the soil. But that wasn't enough. Normal plants take time to grow. Even the wheat in the system would take several days. These starving townsfolk couldn't wait that long. I needed to speed up the process. I quickly combined wooden slabs on the crafting table. A few seconds later, a large, wooden grid barrel appeared in my hands, a composter. I slammed the composter down in the open space at the center of town. Then, I told the townsfolk to bring over every bit of dried grass, rotten leaves, and even the stinking aquatic weeds dug up from the dried riverbed they could find. I stuffed all that junk into the composter all at once. As I moved, green starlight emanated from the composter, and the useless withered grass was instantly degraded and compressed under the system's rules. A few seconds later, a piece of pristine white bone meal popped out of the bin. Holding the bone meal, I walked over to the wheat seedling and sprinkled it directly onto the plant. Swish! Amidst the dazzling green system light effect, the inch-high seedling looked as if a 100-fold fast-forward button had been pressed. Within a single second, it shot up frantically and headed out, instantly transforming into a stalk of golden, heavy, mature wheat. The 50-plus onlookers from the town let out a collective gasp. Mayor Harrison's eyes nearly popped out of his head. No waiting for seasons, no checking the weather, just a few handfuls of withered grass exchanged for a white powder that, when sprinkled, yielded instant food. If this wasn't a miracle, what was? I immediately harvested the wheat, crafted a loaf of bread, and tossed it to little Theodore, who was on the verge of fainting from hunger. Theodore wolfed it down, and a hint of color instantly returned to his gaunt little face. However, farming alone was far too slow. I couldn't spend every day acting like a nanny, tilling the soil stroke by stroke to feed over 50 people. I had to liberate the forces of production. Staring at the composter in front of me, a thought flashed through my mind regarding the most powerful mechanic in Minecraft: villager profession changes. In the game, as long as you place a specific job site block next to an unemployed villager, they automatically take on the corresponding profession. For example, place a blast furnace and they become an armorer. Place a lectern and they become a librarian. And the profession corresponding to the composter is, precisely, the farmer. I looked at Carter, the strongest among the crowd who had just regained some of his strength, and pointed to the composter on the ground, saying, "Carter, come over here, get close to this barrel, and touch it with your hand." Although Carter didn't understand why, I was now a supreme deity to them. Without hesitation, he strode forward and pressed his rough, large hand against the rim of the composter. At the very moment his palm made contact with the composter, Virum! A strange green halo suddenly erupted from the compost bin, directly enveloping Carter's entire body. Startled, Carter instinctively tried to step back, but the halo instantly tightened around him. In the next second, an incredible scene unfolded. Carter had been wearing a tattered plaid shirt, but now, the surface of that shirt suddenly blurred. Immediately after, a wide-brimmed straw hat, highly iconic of the system, appeared out of thin air on his head. Not only that, but a burlap sack filled with seeds had also appeared at his waist. Carter froze in place. He touched the straw hat on his head, his expression shifting from confusion to a sudden outburst of indescribable fanaticism. I understand. Carter muttered to himself, his body seemingly injected with some kind of instinctive muscle memory. He didn't need me to teach him at all. He grabbed the stone hoe I had placed on the ground and rushed toward the clearing. His movements were as precise as a machine. With one swing, he tilled a perfect plot of farmland. Then, with a backhand motion, he pulled seeds from his waist and planted them. The movements were fluid and seamless, twice as fast as mine, and I was the player. The gods have granted me the authority of cultivation. I am the god-blessed farmer. Carter roared fanatically as he frantically reclaimed the wasteland. The surrounding townsfolk were all dumbfounded. They had known Carter for over a decade. He used to be an auto mechanic who could kill even a cactus. Now, he was acting like a legendary master farmer, tilling dozens of perfect plots of land in just a few minutes. I looked at Carter, wearing his straw hat and tirelessly swinging his hoe, and couldn't help but smile. The system rules really worked. The composter had successfully and forcibly converted an ordinary person from a modern wasteland into a Minecraft system farmer. As long as this job change mechanism existed, I could build a truly incredible system civilization right here in this American-style town. Mayor, call all the strongest people in town over here. I pointed at the composter, my eyes gleaming. I'm going to make sure none of you ever go hungry again. Over the following week, Oaktown underwent earth-shattering changes. Using the composter, I successfully converted the 7 strongest men in town into system-assigned farmers. The moment they donned those straw hats that appeared out of thin air, even the barber, who had never worked a day of manual labor in his life, was instantly transformed into a ruthless farming machine. I cleared out the abandoned baseball field on the outskirts of town and commanded them to cultivate it relentlessly. Thanks to the irrigation from an infinite water source and the stone hose I synthesized through the system, the farmland they tilled completely ignored the wasteland's drought. In just a few short days, the baseball field was transformed into a perfectly orderly expanse of wheat. Whenever the wheat ripened and golden waves rolled in the wind, the emaciated townsfolk would sit on the ridges of the fields, sobbing and praying silently toward me as they gnawed on steaming loaves of system-generated bread. In their eyes, I was no longer just a simple god. I was the supreme being who brought life and harvest. But I knew all too well that in this fictional modern wasteland, the dangers extended far beyond mere drought and famine. That noon, I was sitting on the roof of the town's abandoned church, munching on a roasted potato while organizing the newly synthesized iron sword and armor in my system interface. These iron resources were refined from dozens of scrapped cars I had dismantled by hand at the junkyard on the edge of town. Through this period of continuous gathering, synthesizing, and planting, my system experience bar had been slowly rising. My level had now reached 9, just a sliver of experience away from level 10. I had a faint feeling that level 10 would be a significant watershed moment. Just then, on the distant, previously deathly silent highway, a cloud of arrogant yellow sand suddenly kicked up. 3 heavy-duty off-road vehicles emblazoned with the federal government logo roared into Oak Town like rabid dogs off their leashes. The vehicles screeched to a halt in front of the dried-up fountain square in the town center, the resulting dust cloud coating the faces of several townspeople standing by the roadside. The car doors were flung open violently, and a dozen armed personnel wearing black tactical vests and clutching assault rifles jumped out. They were tax collectors for this corrupt federal government, or rather, a gang of bandits cloaked in a veneer of legality. In this world, the federal government had fallen under the control of a dictator named Roland. To sustain his regime and military, they would descend every month to forcibly seize supplies, even as the common folk outside starved to death by the roadside. Leading them was a bald, portly man wearing sunglasses and chomping on a cigar. He strode up to Mayor Harrison, exhaling a puff of smoke with a mirthless grin. "Old Harrison, I heard this backwater town of yours came into a bit of luck recently. We could smell the scent of toasted bread from miles away. It's time to pay up this month's survival tax, isn't it?" Although Mayor Harrison felt a tremor of fear in his heart, his spine stiffened slightly at the thought of the deity residing in the town. With trembling hands he pulled a cloth bundle from his pocket, containing a few old silver dollars and some valuable metal parts scraped together by the townspeople. "Officer, this is our tax for the month. We've paid in full," Harrison said, handing over the bundle. The bald, fat man hefted the cloth bag, his expression suddenly darkening as he slammed it hard into Harrison's face. Silver coins and mechanical parts scattered across the ground. "Do you think I'm a fucking beggar?" the fat man roared. "The policy from above has changed. Starting this month, in addition to metal currency, every town must hand over an extra 500 pounds of purified water and 50 pounds of food. If you're short by even an ounce, I'll burn this shithole to the ground." The surrounding townspeople clenched their fists in fury. 500 pounds of water? 50 pounds of food? In this wasteland where a single drop of water could buy a life, this was a death sentence. A week ago, the people of Oaktown would have waited for death in absolute despair. But now, they had both water and food. The problem was, if they paid today, this pack of insatiable jackalls would demand even more tomorrow. Furthermore, once the secret of the infinite water source was exposed, the entire Federation army would descend upon them like starving wolves. "We don't have any extra food or water. This is robbery." Carter, wearing a straw hat and clutching a stone hoe, stood indignantly in front of the mayor. Several other farmers stepped forward as well, their system-issued hoes gripped tightly in their hands. The bald, fat man froze for a moment. He seemingly hadn't expected this notoriously weak town to actually dare to resist. He glanced at the straw hat on Carter's head and the stone hoe in his hand, then suddenly burst into a fit of insolent laughter. "Ha! A bunch of mud-legged peasants with broken hoes actually want to revolt?" The fat man abruptly drew the sidearm from his waist and pressed it directly against Carter's forehead, his gaze turning vicious. "I am robbing you. Since you won't hand it over, I'll search for it myself. Empty out everything they have to eat and drink. If anyone dares to stop us, shoot them in the legs." A dozen fully armed soldiers immediately racked their bolts, closing in on the townspeople like wolves and tigers. A few soldiers even noticed the small patch of fenced-off wheat field next to the church not far away, their eyes gleaming with greed. "Don't go over there. That is the domain of the gods." Carter's eyes nearly burst from their sockets as he tried to rush forward to stop them. "To hell with your gods." The bald, fat man's gaze turned sharp. He swung his gun around, aiming directly at Carter's knee, and prepared to pull the trigger. Bang! A muffled gunshot echoed across the square. But it wasn't Carter who fell. I stood on the roof of the church, holding a bough that emitted a faint purple glow. The sound just now wasn't a gunshot at all, but a sonic boom caused by the rapid snapback of the bowstring. This system-produced wooden bow, once enchanted with the most basic, power eye, possessed power comparable to a large-caliber sniper rifle. A crude wooden arrow accurately pierced the right wrist of the bald, fat man holding the gun. His pistol clattered to the ground as he let out a scream like a slaughtered pig. "Who's there? Fire! Fire!" The tax collectors instantly fell into a panic, raising their rifles and firing wildly toward the church. Bullets struck the wooden roof, sending splinters flying everywhere. I didn't dodge. Because the moment I fired that arrow, my experience bar let out a crisp chime that only I could hear. Level up, LV.10. A strange surge of heat instantly spread from my heart to my entire body. In my field of vision, the system boundary line, which could previously barely cover the center of the town, suddenly rippled outward like a golden wave, expanding at a terrifying speed. 1 kilometer. 2 kilometers. 5 kilometers. The moment the system boundary covered the entirety of Oaktown and its surroundings, a miracle descended. The weeds, once scorched yellow and withered by the drought, were forcibly refreshed by the system within a single second, turning into a vibrant, lush emerald green. The dead trees lining the road shed their shriveled bark as dense oak leaves sprouted anew. The sweltering heat in the air was swept away, replaced by a vibrant, life-giving coolness. The entire town of Oaktown looked as if someone had taken the highest saturation pigments and repainted them over a canvas of gray wasteland. The tax collectors, who had been firing their weapons frantically, were awestruck by this godlike spectacle, and the gunfire came to an abrupt halt. They stared wide-eyed at the world around them, which had revived in an instant, their faces filled with expressions of pure disbelief. What kind of sorcery is this? The bald, fat man clutched his wrist, backing away in terror. But this was not the end. With the full establishment of the Level 10 territory, the system's security mechanism was formally activated. Upon the base of the abandoned fountain in the center of Oaktown, the air suddenly distorted violently. 4 massive system iron blocks appeared out of thin air, arranged in a T shape. Immediately following, a pumpkin carved with an eerie smiling face crashed down onto the very top. Boom! A deafening roar erupted. The sound of heavy metal grinding echoed from the fountain's base. A terrifying colossus, nearly 3 meters tall and forged entirely of pure steel, slowly stood up. Its arms were thicker than a normal person's thighs, hanging long past its knees. Its eyes flickered with a crimson glow, and its entire body radiated a suffocating sense of metallic oppression. The strongest guardian of Minecraft, the Iron Golem. What kind of monster is that? Fire! Kill it! The bald, fat man shrieked piercingly. Over a dozen armed soldiers raised their rifles, frantically pouring bullets into the Iron Golem. Muzzle flashes flared, and the relentless clank-clank of metal clashing echoed through the air. However, the assault rifle rounds, powerful enough to tear a human body apart, struck the Iron Golem's system-generated shell, which defied all laws of physics. Aside from a few sparks, they failed to leave even a single dent. In this world, the hardness of a system iron block was the absolute physical ceiling. Ignoring the rain of bullets, the Iron Golem slowly turned its massive head, which bore a pumpkin-like face. Its crimson eyes locked onto the soldier who was firing most aggressively. In the next second, this lumbering mountain of steel charged forward with a terrifying speed that completely defied its massive size. It simply raised its thick steel right arm and swung it violently upward at the soldier. Bang! It was like hitting a tomato with a baseball bat. The fully armed soldier, weighing over 200 pounds, didn't even have time to scream before he was swatted into the air like a broken kite by this horrific, colossal force, soaring 15 feet high. He cleared the roofs of 2 wooden houses and slammed hard onto the road in the distance, his fate unknown. The entire venue fell into a dead silence. The remaining dozen or so tax collectors watched the arc their companion traced through the air, their rifles clattering to the ground one after another. Their legs gave way, and they collapsed to their knees in unison on the fountain square, cold sweat soaking through their tactical vests. The Iron Golem strode with heavy steps toward the terrified, bald, fat man. The man squeezed his eyes shut, certain he was about to be crushed into a pulp. However, the Iron Golem did not attack him. This terrifying killing machine suddenly bent down, extending 2 thick steel fingers to gently pluck a bright red system-generated poppy from the grass that had just refreshed at the edge of the square. Then, it held the flower out to little Theodore, who had long been standing nearby, staring in a daze. This scene, filled with contrast and extreme tenderness, drove the townspeople of Oaktown into a complete frenzy. This is no monster! This is the divine beast of the Lord! The elder of Harrisontown shouted, tears streaming down his face as he pointed at the Iron Golem. It is protecting us! It is giving flowers to Theodore! I leaped from the church roof, utilizing the system's fall damage reduction to land steadily in the square. I walked up to the group of trembling tax collectors and looked down at them. "Go back and tell your President Roland," I said calmly, yet my voice carried clearly into everyone's ears. "From this day forward, Oaktown is my domain." News of the iron golem instantly killing the tax collectors spread across the surrounding wilderness, as if it had grown wings. I had expected the dictator President Roland to immediately send an army to suppress us, but strangely, the federal government remained eerily quiet. Perhaps they were busy quelling rebellions on the front lines, or perhaps they thought a few useless tax collectors were exaggerating and that it wasn't worth wasting military force. Regardless, this gave me some precious breathing room. With the expansion of the Level 10 territory, Oaktown's reputation was fully established. "The gods have bestowed endless water and inexhaustible wheat fields here." This highly mythologized rumor spread rapidly across the wasteland. Consequently, a massive wave of refugees began. At first, it was small trickles of victims, appearing on the outskirts of town in groups of 3 or 5, dragging their families along. Later, the number of refugees exploded exponentially. Dozens, then hundreds, and after half a month, the desolate suburbs surrounding Oaktown were densely packed with thousands of ragged, dying fugitives. They came from various states across the Federation, all low-level civilians driven to the brink of survival by the Great Drought and Roland's tyranny. Mayor Harrison looked at the dark mass of people outside the town, so worried he nearly pulled out what little hair he had left. "Lord God!" He stood beside me, his voice trembling. "We do have more food than we can eat right now, but there are thousands of them. The town simply can't hold them all, and if a riot breaks out, a single divine beast won't be enough to suppress it." I looked at the refugees staring toward the town with longing eyes. I felt no panic at all. Instead, a surge of unprecedented excitement rose within me. I need people. A lot of people. Beyond survival, the core gameplay of Minecraft is construction and automation. My current goal isn't just to build a small village. I want to turn this place into an invulnerable system city. And to build a city, one needs a complete division of labor and professional villagers from all walks of life. Have everyone gather at the abandoned golf course in the suburbs. I patted Harrison on the shoulder. Tell them that in Oaktown, no one will starve to death. But in exchange, from this day forward, everyone must work. To manage this massive group of thousands, I had to establish a management layer. Among the refugees, I discovered 2 extremely critical individuals. The first was named Oliver, a white man in his 50s and a former sociology professor at a state university, who had been exiled for criticizing Roland's dictatorship in class. Even among the refugees, he maintained meticulous habits, even using charcoal to record mortality data on scraps of cloth. I summoned him and placed a podium, crafted from wooden planks and bookshelves, in front of him. "Touch it," I commanded. Oliver, with a scholar's skepticism, reached out to touch the lectern. A flash of green light erupted, and his tattered, filthy suit was instantly transformed into a high-quality scholar's robe, while a pair of gold-rimmed glasses appeared out of thin navy on the bridge of his nose. What kind of knowledge infusion is this?" Oliver exclaimed, steadying his glasses in shock. Having changed classes to librarian, his brain was instantly endowed by the system with powerful information processing, data induction, and a photographic memory. "From now on, you are the chief archon of Oaktown," I said, looking at him. "You will be responsible for population registration, resource coordination, and the drafting of laws." Oliver took a deep breath, his newfound rationality far exceeding that of an ordinary human, allowing him to quickly accept the reality of the situation. "As you command, my lord. I guarantee these thousands of people will operate with the precision of clockwork gears." The second person I chose was Valerie. She was a woman in her early 30s, tall and muscular, with a scar running from the corner of her eye down to her chin. During a food riot in the refugee camp, she single-handedly took down 6 burly men with her bare hands, using textbook American SWAT combat techniques. Upon inquiry, I learned she was once a captain of the Federal Special Assault Team, turned fugitive after refusing orders to massacre civilians. I didn't give her a profession block because the system's current guard mechanics weren't yet fully developed. Instead, I gave her a set of enchanted iron armor I had just pulled from the system furnace, along with an iron sword imbued with sharpness 2. Valerie donned the somewhat bulky-looking iron armor and gave the seemingly ordinary iron sword an experimental swing. She walked over to a scrapped car hood nearby and delivered a casual downward strike. Rip, there were no sparks, and no resistance. The thick steel plate was sliced into 2 smooth halves, as if it were nothing more than soft tofu. Valerie gasped, her eyes instantly becoming extremely dangerous and excited. "Sir?" She gave me a crisp, standard military salute. Give me 100 men, and I can flip Roland's presidential palace upside down for you. Don't be so quick to start a rebellion. Let's build the home security team first. I smiled. I had her select 300 of the strongest and most disciplined young men from among the refugees to form Oaktown's first security guard, responsible for maintaining order and defending against external threats. Once the management structure was in place, the real main event began, the infrastructure frenzy. With thousands of people living in the open wasteland, there were serious health and security risks. I had to build housing for them in the shortest time possible. If this were a real-world construction crew, even working day and night, it would take years to build a residential area for thousands of people. But I am a Minecraft player with a system inventory. That evening, under the shocked and nearly numb gazes of thousands of refugees, I walked alone onto the open grass of the golf course. I pulled out stacks of oak planks, cobblestone, and glass blocks from my inventory, materials I had mass-produced using the surrounding ruins. I didn't even need to lay a foundation. Slap! 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 Accompanied by the crisp sound effects of the system placing blocks, I moved across the clearing like a phantom. Perfect 1 cubic meter blocks appeared out of thin air, snapping together with precision. First floor, second floor, third floor. Walls, floors, stairs, doors, and windows. The entire construction process was like watching an incredibly aggressive form of 3D printing. No cement, no steel reinforcement, and no scaffolding. The building materials completely defied gravity and structural mechanics, interlocking in an absolutely perfect systemic structure. In just 3 short hours. As night fell and moonlight spilled across the wasteland, a complex of 60 uniform row houses, each 4 stories high and capable of housing over 10,000 people, had miraculously risen from the ground. Between the apartments, smooth cobblestone streets were laid out, lined with torches that emitted an eternal glow. Thousands of refugees stood in dead silence on the periphery, gazing at this miraculous city that seemed to have descended from the heavens. Many even forgot to breathe. What are you all standing around for? Oliver, get everyone settled in. Starting tomorrow morning, everyone gets to work. I shouted, wiping non-existent sweat from my forehead. Now that they had shelter, the next step was solving the long-term food supply for these thousands of people. Relying solely on Carter and his few farmers to till the land by hand was no longer nearly enough. The next day, I led the townsfolk in clearing a massive farming zone behind the residential area. Using redstone dust, hoppers, chests, and flowing water, I constructed a semi-automatic farmland system. Dozens of refugees who had been converted into farmers were responsible for planting seeds across the terraced fields. Once the wheat and potatoes matured, one only had to pull a lever. The water system hidden within the dam would instantly flush down, sweeping all the crops precisely into the hopper slots at the bottom, where they were finally transported automatically into the large chests in the warehouse. In addition to agriculture, I placed a large number of various job site blocks throughout the city. Placed down blast furnaces, and dozens of blacksmiths appear. Placed down cartography tables, and dozens of cartographers emerge. Placed down stonecutters, and a multitude of stonemasons begin processing building materials. A group of refugees, once useless and dying from the great drought, were instantly transformed into the most powerful productive force of a high-efficiency city under the forced conversion of the system rules. Dressed in the attire of their various professions, they shuttled through the leveled streets, automatically harvesting, smithing, and trading. The entire Oaktown has completely shed its skin from a dilapidated American-style countryside, evolving into a wasteland fortress filled with a blend of magic and industry. As the population surged and the territory prospered once more, the system's protection mechanisms were also operating at full throttle. Around the town square, accompanied by the heavy thuds of metal hitting the ground, 5 brand-new pumpkin-headed iron golems spawned out of thin air. Now, a total of 6 steel behemoths, standing 3 meters tall and composed entirely of invincible system iron blocks, began patrolling the city streets day and night. Safety, sustenance, and hope. In this broken world, Oaktown had become a true utopia. But this was destined not to last. That afternoon, Valerie rushed into my temporary command post, a luxurious 2-story villa built of red brick and glass, with a look of grave concern on her face. "My lord, something has happened." Valerie slammed a blood-stained map onto the table. "Our scouts patrolling dozens of miles away sent word. That madman Roland, he has finally made his move." I looked at the red markers on the map and frowned. "How many are coming?" "It's not local forces. It's the elite of the Federal 1st Armored Division, reporting directly to the President." Valerie took a deep breath, her voice tight. "Captain Jackson is leading them personally. 5,000 fully equipped heavy infantry regulars, plus 200 SWAT officers with heavy firepower. They've brought armored vehicles, mortars, and flamethrowers. They are expected to arrive at Oaktown by tomorrow morning. I stood up and walked to the window. Looking out at the bustling, peaceful system villagers, my gaze gradually turned cold. 5,000 men? I pulled an iron sword shimmering with purple enchantment light from my system inventory. Perfect. I've been wanting to test whether the system's defenses can actually withstand the firepower of a modern army. The morning mist had not yet dissipated when the earth began to tremble faintly. At first, the sound was like a dull, distant thunder, but the vibration soon transformed into a tangible pressure. The parched yellow sands of the wasteland were churned up by treads and heavy combat boots, forming a murky storm that stretched across the horizon. The Federation's 1st Armored Division had arrived. Captain Jackson sat atop a heavy armored command vehicle, holding high-powered tactical binoculars with a cruel sneer playing on his lips. As President Roland's most ruthless lapdog, his orders this time were simple: level Oaktown to the ground, slaughter every insurgent who dared to resist, and capture alive the rumored mage, or hacker, capable of creating infinite water. The remaining refugees were to be branded and escorted back to the capital city, where the presidential palace stood, to work in the mines. Sir, the scouts ahead report that we are 2 miles from the target. But they say something isn't right. The signalman's voice stammered slightly over the headset. What do you mean, not right? Are you telling me those starving peasants actually managed to dig trenches? Jackson spat out his cigar contemptuously. It's not trenches, sir. They say there's a wall ahead. 10 minutes later, as Jackson's convoy crested the final sand dune, he finally understood why the scouts had been stammering. What appeared before the Federal Army was not some dilapidated American country town, but an extremely eerie, utterly counterintuitive military fortress. A massive wall, 3 stories high and at least 2 meters thick, was wedged firmly at the entrance of the basin. What made Jackson's skin crawl the most was the material of this wall. It wasn't built of bricks, nor was it poured concrete. Instead, it was composed of 1 cubic meter blocks of rough gray stone, cobblestone, pieced together in an absolutely perfect manner without a single gap. There was no mortar, nor any visible structural support. The wall looked as if it had been embedded into this world directly from another dimension. Atop the wall stood rows of torches that never went out, emitting an eerie glow amidst the early morning mist. What the hell is this? Who built this? Jackson roared in fury. He had studied modern engineering at the military academy. To build such a seamless stone wall in a matter of days in the middle of a wilderness without any heavy machinery was nothing short of a fantasy. But he had no time for astonishment. In the very center of the city wall, 2 heavy, dark oak gates slowly swung open to the accompaniment of a creaking sound effect. Behind the gates, there were no dense crowds of refugees, nor any disorganized mobs. Valerie rode out at a slow pace on a jet-black system steed obtained from who knows where. Closely following behind her were 50 soldiers of the Oaktown Security Guard. This was the welcoming party I had prepared for Jackson. 50 people against 5,000 fully armed heavy infantry regulars and SWAT officers. In terms of numbers, it was a suicidal charge that bordered on the utterly absurd. But Jackson and his officers couldn't bring themselves to laugh. Their pupils constricted sharply as they stared intently at those 50 individuals. Because the equipment these 50 people were wearing completely transcended their understanding. Valerie and her team members wore no bulletproof vests, nor did they wear Kevlar helmets. From head to toe, they were encased in heavy, silver-white full-body armor forged from system iron. The style of this armor was incredibly peculiar, appearing as if square sheets of iron had been crudely pieced together, looking extremely cumbersome. And in their hands they held not assault rifles, but system iron swords shimmering with a heart-palpitating purple glow. Every piece of iron armor and every iron sword rippled with that purple enchantment, luster, as if some ancient and dangerous magical symbols were breathing. Sir, are they insane? Facing our armored vehicles with cold weapons? An adjutant nearby swallowed hard. Despite his words, the hand gripping his gun was trembling slightly. Superstitious pieces of filth! Jackson snapped out of his shock, his heart burning with rage. Order the armored vehicles to ready their main cannons. Heavy machine guns, suppressive fire. SWAT teams, prepare to charge. Blow them into mincemeat. At his command, the engines of the 3 heavy armored vehicles let out a deafening roar as they advanced side by side. The heavy machine guns atop the vehicles began to spin frantically, their muzzles spitting tongues of fire half a meter long. Rat-tat-tat-tat-tat. A dense hail of metal bullets poured toward Valerie and her 50 guards like a storm. Bullets of this caliber were powerful enough to tear an elephant to shreds and shatter a brick wall into dust. However, a scene of utter despair unfolded. Clang! Clang! Clink! Clank! The bullets pelted the iron armor of the security guards like raindrops, erupting in dazzling sparks. Yet these were not the sounds of penetration, but the crisp echoes of metal being deflected. In the face of the absolute defense determined by the system, combined with the Protection 2 enchantment I had placed on the iron armor, the kinetic impact of modern weaponry was weakened to an outrageous degree. Those bullets, powerful enough to tear through steel, struck the system's iron armor and failed to penetrate at all, leaving nothing but a few shallow white scratches. Although the massive kinetic energy forced several guard soldiers back a few steps, not one of them fell. They stood like a silver-white wall of size, stubbornly withstanding this wave of devastating fire coverage. This is impossible! Switch to armor-piercing rounds! Get me armor-piercing rounds! Jackson pounded the roof of the vehicle frantically. But he no longer had the chance. Counterattack! Valerie roared, her voice tearing through the din of the battlefield as she held her purple-glowing enchanted iron sword high amidst the line of fire. 50 warriors clad in enchanted iron armor, like 50 tigers unleashed from their cages, charged toward the Federation Army's formation with extreme ferocity, braving the hail of bullets. The first to meet them were 200 SWAT officers armed with riot shields and tactical shotguns. These officers were the most elite close-quarters combat force under Roland's command, typically specialized in suppressing riots. A burly SWAT captain raised his heavy alloy riot shield, attempting to block Valerie's charge. He had absolute confidence. This shield could stop rifle rounds, let alone a mere iron sword. Valerie didn't slow down at all. She didn't even use any complex fighting techniques. She simply leveraged the momentum of her warhorse, gripped her iron sword with both hands, and delivered an incredibly simple and brutal downward hack. Screech! Crack! There was no loud clang of metal clashing, only a tooth-grinding tearing sound. The system iron sword, imbued with sharpness 2, sliced through the SWAT captain's alloy riot shield as easily as cutting through butter. The sword's momentum remained unchecked, slicing straight through the captain's high-grade body armor and tactical vest, cutting him in half diagonally. The SWAT captain didn't even feel the pain. He stared blankly down at his neatly sliced equipment before collapsing heavily to the ground. Kill! 50 guard soldiers charged into the SWAT formation like a hot knife through butter. With every swing of their swords, they easily severed gun barrels and tore through body armor. Before the weapon damage calculation formulas of Minecraft, the defensive gear of modern SWAT teams was as fragile as a sheet of paper. Chaos instantly erupted within the Federation Army's formation. While the frontline SWAT officers were being unilaterally slaughtered, the regular soldiers in the rear watched those invulnerable, iron cans, who could send a man flying with a single strike, as an uncontrollable fear began to take root in their hearts. Don't panic! There are only 50 of them. Overwhelm them with numbers. Heavy infantry, fix bayonets. Surround them. Jackson drew his command saber and roared hysterically. After all, the 5,000 regular troops were well trained. After a brief moment of chaos, they leveled their bayonet rifles and surged toward the 50 guards like a tidal wave. Hundreds of halberds and bayonets thrust at Valerie from all directions. No matter how high the defense of the system's iron armor was, being mobbed by thousands of people and constantly struck by massive kinetic energy would cause its durability to drop rapidly, and the soldiers inside would be unable to withstand the concussive damage. One of Valerie's team members was struck in the chest by 3 bayonets simultaneously. Although the bayonets buckled instantly, the immense force still made him cough up a mouthful of blood and fall to one knee. Commander! There are too many of them! Valerie forced back several soldiers with a swing of her sword and turned her head toward the city walls. I stood atop the highest sentry tower of the wall, gripping a system bow that pulsed with an intense purple light. I looked down coldly at the Federation army surging like a black tide, a cruel smile curling at the corners of my mouth. Don't worry. The real monsters have only just been unleashed. The moment the words left my lips, from inside the city gates came the sound of extremely heavy footsteps that made the very earth tremble. The rhythm was slow, but each step felt as if it were treading directly on everyone's hearts. Thud! 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 6 pumpkin-headed giants, 3 meters tall and radiating a cold metallic luster, stepped out from the city gates with heavy strides. Iron golems. Not just one, but 6 of them. When these 6 mobile steel fortresses appeared on the battlefield, the clamor of the entire war zone seemed to be muted in an instant. Captain Jackson's mouth hung open, and his commanding saber fell onto the armored vehicle with a sharp clang. The soldiers of the Federation army stared up blankly at these terrifying behemoths. In the next second, the 6 iron golems locked onto the enemy. The crimson light in their eyes flared violently, and they emitted a bone-chilling mechanical roar. Like 6 out-of-control bulldozers, they crashed directly into the densest phalanx of the Federation army. The true clash of steel had begun. The situation on the battlefield underwent an utterly absurd reversal the moment the 6 iron golems charged into the enemy ranks. This could no longer be called a war. It was a complete, one-sided crushing that defied all laws of physics. Fire! Use anti-material rifles! Use RPGs! Blow these iron lumps to pieces! Captain Jackson stomped his feet frantically atop the command vehicle, his voice turning shrill with extreme terror. Several Federation soldiers, trembling as they shouldered their RPGs, pulled the triggers. 2 rockets, trailing plumes of fire, whistled through the air and slammed into the broad chest of one of the iron golems. Boom! Boom! A violent explosion kicked up a massive cloud of dust and sand, with flames soaring into the sky. Several nearby Federation soldiers were knocked to the ground by the shockwave. Jackson stared intently at the center of the blast, hoping to see a pile of scrap metal. However, as the smoke and dust cleared, the iron golem merely swayed its body slightly. On its chest, the casing made of system iron blocks bore only a tiny, insignificant black scorch mark, hardly losing any durability at all. In my craft's damage calculation, unless it were a high-intensity TNT explosion array, this level of thermal weapon damage was nothing more than a tickle to an iron golem with its inherent high resistance. The iron golem slowly turned its head, locking onto the soldiers who had fired the RPGs. It stepped out with its thick legs, charging forward with a terrifying burst of speed that was completely inconsistent with its massive size. No! Stay back! The soldiers were so terrified that they dropped their launchers and turned to flee. But it was too late. The iron golem's steel right arm, thicker than a water bucket, swung upward with a violent force, creating a piercing whistle of wind. Bang! There was a dull thud that made one's scalp tingle. The fully armed soldiers, along with the sandbag fortifications beside them, were swatted into the air like bowling pins. They traced a parabolic arc dozens of feet long before slamming heavily into the armored vehicles behind them, instantly losing all combat capability. A monster! This is a real monster! The Federation Army's formation completely collapsed. The heavy infantry discovered in horror that their proud bayonets couldn't even scratch the iron golem's surface. The SWAT team's shotguns couldn't even kick up a spark against it. And even if the iron golem just walked casually, its terrifying tonnage could directly trample the soldiers in its path into critical condition. The 6 iron golems were like 6 tireless gods of slaughter, trampling wantonly through the 5,000-man formation. With every swing of their arms, several or even a dozen soldiers were sent flying like ragdolls. Meanwhile, the 50 enchanted guards led by Valerie followed closely behind the gaps cleared by the iron golems, using their enchanted iron swords to ruthlessly harvest the remnants of the terrified army. I stood at the highest point of the city wall, looking down at the massacre. However, I knew clearly in my heart that if I truly killed all 5,000 men, it would serve no purpose other than creating a bloodbath. Oaktown needed construction and a larger population, and these 5,000 regular soldiers, whose physical fitness far exceeded that of refugees, were extremely high quality. Resources. I raised the purple glowing system wooden bow in my hand. This bow was not only enchanted with Power 4 and Flame, but most importantly, it was enchanted with Infinity. This meant that as long as I had a single arrow in my inventory, I could fire a never-ending stream of arrows. I didn't aim at the people. Instead, I raised the bow slightly, pointing it toward the sky above the battlefield. Swoosh! I drew the bowstring to its limit and suddenly let go. A wooden arrow, burning with system flames, tore through the sky. Then came a second, a third. My hand speed reached its absolute limit, and with the blessing of the infinite enchantment, I alone unleashed a terrifying rain of arrows comparable to an entire archer battalion. The sky full of flaming arrows, like a meteor shower, did not strike the crowd directly. Instead, they landed precisely on the outskirts and open spaces surrounding the Federation Army's formation. Boom! 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 The moment these arrows hit the ground, the effects of the flame enchantment were fully triggered. Blazing walls of fire rose out of thin air across the wasteland, instantly cutting off the Federation Army's retreat and trapping them firmly in the center of the basin. Retreat! Retreat! Break through the wall of fire! Captain Jackson had completely broken down, violently slamming his hand against the armored vehicle's cabin. Quick! Turn the vehicle around and ram our way out! The driver, drenched in sweat, floored the accelerator in an attempt to force the armored vehicle through the wall of fire that appeared to be only half a meter high. But what they didn't know was that system flames could not be easily extinguished by physical means. The moment the vehicle's tracks pressed over the fire, the seemingly weak sparks surged directly up the metal. The terrifyingly high temperature instantly melted the rubber components of the tires and tracks. The armored vehicle emitted a harsh, grinding metallic screech and ground to a complete halt at the edge of the firewall. Caught between a rock and a hard place, the 5,000-strong Federation army was now like lambs trapped in a pen, waiting for the slaughter. That should do it. I lowered my bow and arrow. From my inventory, I pulled out several glass bottles filled with a murky, grayish-brown liquid, splash potion of weakness. This was something I had brewed using the system's brewing stand, combining fermented spider eyes, crafted from spider eyes found in the basement, brown mushrooms, and sugar, with various strange materials scavenged from the abandoned hospital. From my high vantage point, I threw the potions with all my might into the densest part of the Federation army's ranks. Asterisk smash. Shatter. Asterisk. The sound of glass bottles shattering was hardly noticeable on the noisy battlefield. However, as the grayish-brown smoke spread rapidly through the air like ripples, an extremely eerie scene unfolded. Federal soldiers who inhaled or came into contact with the smoke were frantically pulling triggers or brandishing bayonets 1 second. The next, it was as if the bones had been drained from their bodies. Their faces turned deathly pale instantly, their legs gave way, and they collapsed directly to the ground. My hands! Why can't I lift my hands? An exceptionally muscular machine gunner stared at his hands in terror. He could no longer even grip a lightweight pistol. The weakness, debuff was forcibly imposed upon these real-world humans. Under the suppression of the system's rules, their physical strength was instantly diminished to a level inferior to that of an infant. Large swaths of soldiers fell like dominoes, unable to even hold their weapons steady. Following that, I tossed out several bottles of splash potion of healing, emitting a pink glow, which landed precisely on Valerie and several wounded guardsmen. As the magical light effects flashed, the guardsman who had originally been skewered through the chest by 3 bayonets saw his wounds heal instantly, leaving not even a scar. He sprang to his feet, let out a spirited roar, and charged back into the enemy ranks. This life-and-death demonstration of overwhelming superiority became the final straw that broke the psychological defenses of the Federation army. Faced with invulnerable steel behemoths, super soldiers wielding magical weapons, poisonous mists that instantly drained one's strength, and miracles that brought the dead back to life in a heartbeat. This was no longer a war. This was a struggle against the divine. I surrender! Don't kill me! I surrender! It was unclear who shouted it first, but it spread instantly like a plague. A soldier threw down his rifle and collapsed to his knees with a heavy thud, thrusting his hands high into the air. Clang! Clang! Countless weapons were discarded onto the sandy ground. Thousands of Federation regulars, who moments ago had been fierce and imposing, were now all kneeling outside the walls of Oak Town. They trembled as they kowtowed toward my direction atop the battlements, their eyes filled not with humiliation, but with awe and a desperate longing for survival. Even Captain Jackson climbed down from the crippled armored vehicle. The once arrogant commander, now covered in mud and scorch marks, tremblingly unbuckled his sidearm, threw it to the ground, and fell heavily to his knees. The entire battlefield was deathly silent, save for the occasional mechanical hum of the iron golems. Standing atop the city walls, I looked down at the dense mass of 5,000 soldiers kneeling below, and let out a long, deep breath. At that moment, the system interface suddenly began to flash frantically, erupting with a blinding red light. Warning! Large-scale reality distortion detected. Structural collapse of the world is intensifying. The void virus is spreading at an accelerated rate. At the same time, I felt the city walls beneath my feet vibrating violently. This wasn't due to the battle, but because the entire earth was trembling. I snapped my head up, looking toward the far reaches of the battlefield, in the direction of the Federation capital. The sky there should have been filled with blue sky and white clouds, but now, it looked as if a giant black cloth had been forcibly torn down the middle. A colossal, ink-black fissure spanned across the horizon. Through that rift, I once again saw that nauseating, purple-black, void, energy, capable of erasing everything in its path. And within that churning void, there seemed to be a colossal, pitch-black eye, staring coldly down at me. In that instant, every hair on my body stood on end. So, this is the true cause of this great drought, I muttered to myself, my eyes fixed intently on that rift. The dictator Roland? An army of 5,000? They aren't the greatest enemies of this world at all. This world is being utterly destroyed by a virus, capable of deleting reality itself. The pitch-black crack in the sky resembled a hideously ugly scar, stretching across the originally grayish-yellow wasteland. Through that fissure, purple-black void energy dripped slowly into this broken world like viscous venom. The 5,000 Federation soldiers kneeling on the ground, along with the tens of thousands of Oaktown residents within the city walls, all looked up at the sky in terror. They did not understand what was happening. They only instinctively felt a dread originating from the depths of their souls, the crushing sensation of the entire world being erased by some indescribable power. The red light from the system interface stung my eyes, as a series of shocking data points scrolled frantically across my retina. Warning: materialization of void virus detected. Warning: world reality structural damage has reached 89%. Administrator protocol activated. Minecraft system core mission: repair damaged cosmic structures, purge void viruses, and restore the stability of physical laws. I stared intently at that system prompt as the fragmented clues in my mind finally connected. I finally understood why I had been transmigrated here. This fictional modern American world wasn't suffering from a naturally occurring drought. The so-called Great Drought was actually the entire planet's ecosystem and physical laws being erased bit by a force known as the Void, just like files infected by a computer virus. This world was originally supposed to be maintained by gods, or some kind of higher laws. But those so-called gods have likely long since been deleted by the Void virus. At the final moment before the world's total collapse, the lingering will of the universe reached across dimensions to summon a low-level code editor, capable of directly rewriting physical rules and forcibly overriding reality. That is the Minecraft system. And I am the administrator who was forcibly dragged here to act as the antivirus software. No wonder I can generate infinite water just by pouring 2 buckets, and no wonder a handful of bone meal can make plants mature instantly. Because these aren't magic at all, this is the highest level underlying code forcibly resetting the rules of this world. Boom! A deafening roar, powerful enough to seemingly shatter the entire planet, erupted from the depths of the rift. The massive crack in the sky was forcibly pried open. Amidst the collective gasps of the crowd, an immense entity composed purely of darkness and purple light slowly squeezed its way out of the void. It looked strikingly similar to the final boss of Minecraft, the Ender Dragon. However, it was 10,000 times more terrifying than the Ender Dragon in the game. Its wingspan exceeded 100 meters, and with every flap, it left ripples of purple-black spatial distortion in the air. It possessed no physical flesh. Its entire body appeared as if it were carved from the deepest reaches of the night sky. Its eyes were 2 clusters of burning purple flames, radiating a malice potent enough to drive an ordinary person insane in an instant. The Void Ender Dragon let out a deafening roar as a mass of violet-black breath cascaded from the sky like a waterfall, crashing onto a range of abandoned mountains dozens of miles away. A bone-chilling scene unfolded. There was no explosion, no flash of fire. The moment the violet-black breath made contact with the mountains, the entire range vanished silently, just like an image on a computer screen being selected and then deleted with the press of the delete key. Not even a speck of dust remained. All that was left on the ground was an incredibly smooth, bottomless crater. No. What is that thing? It ate the mountain! The Federation soldiers beneath the city walls erupted in screams of despair, their newly established faith collapsing instantly in the face of absolute destruction. Mayor Harrison, Oliver, Carter, and all the residents of Oaktown slumped to the ground, losing even the strength to pray. Valerie charged to the foot of the city wall on her warhorse, looking up at me with eyes full of death-defying resolve. "Sir! What on earth is that thing? Give the order! Even if it means death, I'll lead a charge to tear a piece of flesh off it." No. I leaped down from the wall, landing steadily in front of Valerie, my voice cold but unshakable. "All of you, retreat into the city and hide inside the system buildings. Do not approach, and do not look up. If an ordinary person catches even a trace of that aura, they will be erased directly from the level of existence." "But how can you possibly face it alone?" Valerie panicked, grabbing my arm. I gently pushed her hand away and gave a faint smile. "I am the administrator. Deleting viruses is my job." I turned around, no longer paying any mind to the shouting behind me. Taking a deep breath, I opened my inventory and began to arm myself. I stripped off the set of ordinary iron armor I was wearing and replaced it with the ultimate God Tier gear, the set I had spent months gathering precious resources for and countless hours grinding at the enchantment table to perfect. The diamond set. Ice blue diamond chest plate, helmet, leggings, and boots, radiating a blinding purple enchanted glow, instantly covered my body. Every single piece of equipment was maxed out with top-tier enchantments, Protection 4, Unbreaking 3, and Mending. Next, I pulled a deep blue diamond sword from my backpack, its surface shimmering with the violent glow of Sharpness V and Knockback 2. Finally, I took out that ultimate God Tier bow, imbued with Power V, Infinity, and Flame, along with several enchanted golden apples radiating a strange golden light and a few potions filled with colorful liquids. These were all my trump cards. I looked up at the void ender dragon wreaking havoc in the sky. It seemed to sense the aura of rules emanating from me, a force completely antithetical to its own existence. Its purple slit pupils locked onto me intensely. Roar! It let out a piercing screech, its massive body suddenly diving downward, kicking up a hurricane that felt as if it would tear space itself apart as it charged straight for me. "Come on, you pile of junk code!" I growled, biting directly into an enchanted golden apple. An incredibly dense golden light instantly erupted from within my body. Absorption, regeneration, resistance, fire resistance, for top-tier system buffs were applied to me simultaneously. At this very moment in this world, I was the most invincible being in existence. I didn't dodge. Instead, I raised the divine bow and drew the string to its full extent. Swish! An arrow, imbued with terrifying kinetic energy and system-generated flames, transformed into a blinding meteor and shot fiercely toward the diving black dragon. Boom! The arrow struck the black dragon's chest with precision, erupting in a violent burst of fire. The black dragon let out a cry of pain, its diving momentum coming to a sudden halt. Even as an incarnation of the void virus, under the damage calculation of Minecraft's highest-tier weapon, its health bar was forced to decrease. But it was clearly enraged. It opened its abyss-like maw, and a mass of purple-black void breath, over 10 meters in diameter, hurtled toward me like a falling meteorite. This type of breath is capable of erasing all physical existence. I did not shrink back, for I knew that the resistance provided by my diamond armor and enchanted golden apple was rooted in the underlying system rules, something that could not be easily overwritten. Bang! The purple-black breath slammed violently into me, completely submerging my entire body. The ground for dozens of meters around was instantly vaporized under this surge of energy, leaving not even ash behind. But in the next second, a bolt of ice-blue light forcefully tore through that cloud of void mist. I stood there completely unscathed. The Protection 4, glow shimmering on my diamond armor fought frantically against the void's erosion, and the high resistance granted by the enchanted golden apple ensured my health didn't drop by even half a heart. A remarkably human-like look of shock flashed through the ender dragon's purple eyes. It could not comprehend why this tiny human had not been deleted. My turn! I gave it no chance to catch its breath. I pulled out a bottle of strength potion, downed it, and then retrieved a sphere emitting an eerie purple glow from my inventory, an ender pearl. With every ounce of my strength, I hurled the ender pearl toward the back of the black dragon hovering in midair. Swish! A violent distortion of space occurred. The moment the ender pearl struck the dragon's back, my body turned into a purple afterimage, vanishing from the ground instantly and teleporting directly onto the dragon's back 100 meters in the air. The black dragon rolled frantically, attempting to throw me off. The gale-force winds slashed at my face like knives. I gripped the spikes on its back, formed from condensed void energy, and drew the diamond sword shimmering with the light of sharpness V with my right hand. Time for a forced shutdown! I roared, gripping the sword with both hands, and plunged the diamond blade deep into the ender dragon's most vulnerable cervical ganglion. Screech! An incredibly piercing explosion, sounding like millions of shards of glass shattering simultaneously, erupted within my mind. The system's underlying override code surged frantically through the blade of the diamond sword and into the void ender dragon's body. The black dragon let out a scream of ultimate agony as its massive frame began to twitch violently. The purple-black energy composing its body started to dissolve into countless pixelated motes of light, disintegrating wildly in all directions under the forced erasure of the system rules. It struggled, attempting to fly toward the rift, but its body had already begun to collapse uncontrollably. Rumble! While still dozens of meters above the ground, the void ender dragon's entire form completely detonated. A magnificent rain of purple pixelated light showered down, scattering across the entirety of the wasteland. I utilized the system's fall protection mechanism to slam heavily onto the ground. Although I lost half my health, it was quickly restored by the effects of the enchanted golden apple. I gasped for air, panting heavily as I looked up. The pitch-black rift in the sky was slowly closing at a visible rate following the death of the black dragon. Those suffocating void energies were being completely expelled from this world. And at the spot where the black dragon had completely disintegrated, an incredibly pure, polygonal crystal, radiating a brilliant white light like a star, slowly drifted down before me. Item obtained, Nether Star. I held the Nether Star, feeling the terrifying energy contained within it, enough to reshape the world, and a smile of relief finally touched the corners of my mouth. The virus has been cleared. Now, it's time to install the stability patch. I stood upon the devastated wilderness, my hand tightly gripping that nether star, which radiated an endless white light. The crack in the sky had completely closed, but the wasteland remained a wasteland. The parched earth, the dead trees, and the grey dust storm in the distance all served as reminders that while the physical laws of this world had been spared from total deletion, they were now riddled with holes and on the verge of collapse at any moment. A final, piercing golden notification popped up on the system interface. Main quest, repair reality. Required core component, beacon. I took a deep breath and retrieved the obsidian I had mined from the subterranean abyss, after dousing the magma with an infinite water source, along with the glass blocks I had smelted from sand. Amidst the awestruck and expectant gazes of the crowd, I strode back to the central plaza of Oak Town. The 5,000 Federation soldiers remained kneeling submissively outside the city walls, not even daring to lift their heads. Mayor Harrison, Oliver, the Carter family, and tens of thousands of Oaktown residents parted like the Red Sea to clear a wide path for me. My lord! That evil dragon! Mayor Harrison trembled as he came forward to meet me, his eyes filled with the ecstasy of a narrow escape and profound reverence. It's dead. The virus has been purged. I calmly interrupted him, walking to the ruins of the massive, long-dried fountain in the center of the plaza. But the work isn't over yet. I need to apply the final stability patch to this world. Building a beacon required a massive base composed of mineral blocks. During this time, the blacksmith shops throughout Oaktown had worked day and night. Combined with the vast amount of scrap metal I had smelted from the junkyard and seized from the Federation army, I had accumulated a staggering amount of iron ingots in my inventory. My hands moved swiftly across the crafting interface, combining iron ingots into heavy iron blocks. Slap! 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 Accompanied by the crisp system sound effects, I began laying the foundation in the center of the plaza. The bottom layer was a 9x9 square of iron blocks, followed by 7x7, 5x5, and 3x3. A 4-tier steel pyramid, shimmering with a dazzling metallic luster, rose from the ground in just a few minutes. Next I took out the nether star, 3 blocks of obsidian, and 5 blocks of glass. With a single thought, the crafting table erupted in a brilliant light. A transparent block, with a miniature star suspended in its center, appeared in my hands. I leaped onto the top of the iron pyramid and solemnly placed the beacon block in the very center. Then, I pulled out a precious diamond excavated from deep underground, slotted it into the beacon's activation interface, and selected regeneration and resistance as the primary status effects. Activate, I whispered. Vroom. An incredibly ethereal hum, sounding as if it came from the deepest reaches of the universe, suddenly rang out. Immediately following, a pillar of pure white light, exceeding 2 meters in diameter, erupted from the center of the beacon with an absolutely dominant and unstoppable force, soaring straight into the clouds. The light was so blinding that it instantly pierced through the haze and dust that had shrouded the wasteland for years, extending beyond the atmosphere like a pillar of light supporting the heavens and the earth. The moment this pillar of light ignited, every living being in Oaktown, and indeed within a radius of hundreds of kilometers, felt a surge of profound warmth flooding their bodies. The fear and weakness the Federation soldiers had felt due to the void aura were instantly swept away, and the chronic ailments and exhaustion accumulated by the townspeople were completely healed in that instant. But this was only the beginning. As the beacon's pillar of light interfaced with the damaged laws of the world, the code on the system interface began to frantically rewrite the climate of this realm. The clouds in the sky began to converge at a speed visible to the naked eye. Under the forced intervention of the system rules, the originally grayish-yellow clouds churned and turned into a deep, inky black. The suffocating dryness in the air vanished instantly, replaced by an extremely rich moisture mixed with the scent of earth. Boom! A genuine bolt of lightning, carrying the scent of rain, streaked across the sky as muffled thunder echoed between heaven and earth. Standing in the crowd, little Theodore suddenly felt something cool land on the tip of his nose. He reached out blankly and touched his nose. A single drop of water. Immediately followed by a second, a third. Splash! Heavy rain poured down. This wasn't the infinite water source I had created with 2 iron buckets that could only cover a few kilometers. This was a true gift from nature. It was the first sweet rain to grace this wasteland, which had been parched for years, after the system repaired reality. Raindrops as large as beans pelted the cracked asphalt roads, the parched rooftops, and every upturned, incredulous face. The downpour was like a giant sponge, greedily washing away all the despair, dust, and scent of death from the world. Rain! It's rain! It's raining! Mayor Harrison ripped off his cowboy hat, weeping and laughing in the torrential downpour, jumping frantically like a child. Carter scooped up his wife, Evelyn, and their son, Theodore, in his arms. The family of three clung to each other in the mud, letting the heavy rain wash away their tears. Outside the city walls, the 5,000 Federation soldiers saw their lines of defense collapse completely. Casting aside all dignity, they tilted their heads back with mouths wide open, greedily swallowing the rain falling from the sky. Some even crawled on the ground, licking the puddles that had gathered in muddy pits. This torrential downpour signaled the end of the apocalypse. Amidst the sweeping rain and the dazzling beam of the beacon, I stood atop the pyramid, quietly observing it all. My system interface finally settled. The blood-red warnings had all vanished, replaced by a single green notification. Reality structure of the current sector has been repaired. Ecosystem rebooting. 1 month later. Oakwood Town could no longer be called a town. Under the protection of the beacon, and with 5,000 Federation soldiers fully integrated into the city guard and labor force, it had transformed into a massive fortress city with a population approaching 100,000. Dawn City. The once dried riverbed had now become a surging river, flowing toward an unknown distant ocean. Along both banks of the river were golden system wheat fields and busy farmers. The city streets were entirely paved with smooth stone bricks, and they had even begun using redstone technology to install automated streetlights and rail transit. Oliver managed the city with impeccable order, while Valerie trained the group of Federation soldiers into an invincible iron army absolutely loyal to the god of construction. After learning that his army of 5,000 had been completely wiped out and seeing the pillar of light from the beacon piercing the sky, the dictator Roland was so terrified that he completely blockaded the capital, never daring to send out a single soldier again. For the residents of Dawn City, the good life has officially begun. But for me, this world still contains vast stretches of unknown territory. Although the beacons have repaired the reality structure of this continent, what lies across the ocean? In those unknown distant lands, are there still remnants of the Void virus? Are there other monsters born from the collapse of rules? As the administrator, I cannot stay in this starting zone forever. Early this morning, the docks outside Dawn City were teeming with people. Hundreds of thousands of residents gathered there of their own accord, silently gazing at the behemoth anchored in the middle of the great river. It was a massive 3-masted sailing ship that I had spent half a month building by hand using system blocks, dark oak planks, birch fences, and large white sails crafted from vast amounts of wool. It stretched 100 meters long and 30 meters wide, with rows of redstone-connected dispensers, loaded with fire charges and arrows, hidden along the sides, capable of destroying any threat at sea. The ship defied all modern shipbuilding mechanics, yet it fit the buoyancy rules of Minecraft perfectly, resting steadily upon the water's surface. I stood at the bow, clad in my set of ice blue enchanted diamond armor, as the sea breeze ruffled my hair. Valerie stood behind me, fully armed, alongside 100 hand-picked guards wearing enchanted iron armor. They had volunteered to follow me to the ends of the world to sweep away all darkness. "My lord, Dawn City will always be your home," Mayor Harrison shouted from the pier, his voice choking up slightly. I waved to him and turned to look at the vast expanse of water ahead. The sunlight spilled across the river, creating a shimmering dance of light. "Hoist the sails," I commanded. The massive white wool sails billowed in the wind, catching its full force. Driven by redstone pistons, the anchor slowly rose. This incredible system warship cut through the waves, following the great river toward the unknown ocean. The miracles of the wasteland have come to an end, but the journey belonging to the players has only just begun.